Welcome to What's the Scenario with PLRB, where we explore claims and coverage scenarios relevant to insurance professionals. I'm Brennan McLaughlin.
I'm Mike Broad.
I'm Tim Havler. Brennan, what's the scenario?
All right.
Disaster struck at the Cheesecake Manufactory last week when a windstorm knocked over a power line. The resulting power outage caused hundreds of cheesecakes to spoil, from New York cheesecake to no bacon, even causation.
Say, what?
As you may recall, the owners closed for a few days as they manufactured more, and they submitted a claim for the spoilage and lost business income. So now the adjuster wants to know if the windstorm deductible applies despite the intervening power outage.
Ooh.
Before we get into all that, I do have some trivia for you.
All right, yeah.
We're going to talk about wind speeds today. So according to the World Meteorological Association, the maximum natural wind gust ever recorded is 253 miles per hour.
Wow.
And it occurred in, give you some choices, Mauna Loa, Hawaii, Mount Washington, New Hampshire, Barrow Island, Australia, or the Azores.
Who?
The Azores are a set of islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, I thought that was a sitcom on Fox, but no.
I'm going with that one then. Islands in the middle of the Atlantic sound like they're just they're going to get hit by hurricanes the hardest.
I'm thinking along those lines too, Tim, with you, but another island was the Barrow Island, however they pronounce it in Australia. And I'm thinking Australia. You know, there's crazy stuff going on around Australia all the time. So big, dangerous animals and poisonous stuff. So I bet they got some high winds there too. That's where I'm going.
All right, let's check it out here. I think each one of these had, not Mauna Loa, but Mount Washington was no, that's not the right answer, I don't think. That recorded it's one of the ones listed when you look this up. But that's the highest ever directly observed by a human. And the Azores, unfortunately, was another one I made up for the exact reason you said, Tim. I thought it would be. I know. Tried to get you. But Barrow Island. So Mike's got it right there.
I'm back.
The interesting thing there was it took over a decade before they even found the data because it was a privately owned company owned by oil company Chevron. So it just was recorded in a book somewhere and they dug it up a decade later. Now we'll head into the scenario here. I'm not Tim. I don't have a policy in my pocket. I'm going to do my best here. Let's start off by checking out the deductible in this claim, though. So this is from the Windstorm Deductible. There's an endorsement here. The windstorm or hail deductible, as shown in the schedule and set forth in this endorsement, applies to covered loss or damage caused directly or indirectly by windstorm or hail. This deductible applies to each occurrence of windstorm or hail. With respect to covered property at a premises identified in the schedule, no other deductible applies to windstorm. Okay, let's head to the second endorsement that applies here. Spoilage.
Yes.
In relevant part, we will not pay for loss or damage in any one occurrence until the amount of loss or damage exceeds the deductible shown in the declarations. We will then pay the amount of loss or damage in excess of that deductible up to the applicable limit of insurance. No other deductible in this policy applies to the coverage applied by this additional coverage.
What?
Yeah, you could probably hear some issues there. Let's start with the directly or indirectly. So here we've got, if you remember the scenario, a situation where the windstorm knocked over something, power outage. You think that qualifies as directly or indirectly? Is that close enough?
I would think it's got to be one or the other, right? Either direct or indirect. If it was
I would be much more comfortable if there was anti-concurrent causation language rather than just directly or indirectly. And anti-concurrent causation language is that phrase, I don't have it memorized, but I do have a policy. So
Yes.
All
just want to
right.
be clear. I don't want to use any buzzwords so that everyone knows what I'm talking about.
The green one.
So excluded, or in this case, deductible would apply regardless of any other cause or event contributing concurrently or in any sequence to the loss. That's kind of the magic phrase where it really takes you out of the proximate cause realm, because even this phrase directly or indirectly, it does sound pretty like Mike said, it's got to be directly or indirectly, and you use that word indirectly. It's a lot of courts would look at that and still just do a proximate cause analysis. So what's the proximate cause? I would say most often it's the dominant and efficient. Well, what's the dominant and efficient cause? A lot of times that gets left to a jury. So you're leaving that pretty open and risky going forward, as opposed to the magic language that I just read.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to bring in here.
Uh-huh.
And I think that comes up in these claims where you've got this kind of Rube Goldberg machine of events. There's one that we have on our briefs called Turner Construction v. Ace, and we'll link to these. But then that one, you had a windstorm that I think led to a power outage, and then pipes froze, and then they burst, and then there was water damage. So you've got one thing after another.
Oh, wow.
And actually, in that claim, they found that the wind deductible endorsement was ambiguous as applied to the damage caused. It varied, in that case, a little bit more indirectly by wind. But that deductible did not have the directly or indirectly language seen here. So maybe this language addressed that a little bit. And I don't think...
it helps, for sure. It does help. The indirectly word, it helps.
And we were talking about windstorm, but I can't recall what the heck is a windstorm. What is it anyway? What is a windstorm?
I don't know. To me, it seems pretty straightforward. You got a storm. It's windy. I don't know. What do you think, Tim?
Let's go historically.
Oh boy.
The windstorm deductible is not new, but relative to, say, windstorm insurance, where we're paying for windstorm damage, it is newer than that. Windstorm as a named peril, where we're covering it if it's a windstorm, that's ancient. That goes way back. So a lot of those older cases, there's this development going up where courts would kind of go this way and that way. But to me, there's a big difference between interpreting the word windstorm when it's going to help the insured to call it a windstorm versus interpreting the term windstorm when it's going to be detrimental to call it a windstorm for the insured. This is always how courts look at it, because if they see what they perceive as ambiguity, they're usually going to side with the insured. So obviously a deductible, if there's a windstorm, that's going to make the insured pay more. So a lot of when I'm looking at these cases, if it's the windstorm named peril, I'm looking at that differently than if it's a windstorm exclusion. Now, Brennan, you found a case, I think, from Rhode Island where they use the definition that it has to be a wind event with little to no precipitation.
Yeah, I've got that here. That's a Bliss Mine case. We'll put it in the notes. They found that although the storm was accompanied by high winds, and we're talking 35 to 47 miles per hour, with some temporary gusts as high as 100 miles per hour, still didn't qualify as windstorm because it was too rainy, maybe. So that's really interesting, and it dovetails with what we talked about last week, where you can do under the plrb.org weather hub, you can go in and do a full weather cat report and see exactly how fast the winds are and how much precipitation there was. So if you're in Rhode Island, that kind of thing might be helpful. But that's a pretty narrow view of what a windstorm is.
And, just talking with adjusters over the years, it seems to me like most of them, when they're looking at windstorm named peril, say a coverage C, and most wind events, they're going to be pretty comfortable just saying, yeah, we'll cover that as windstorm. Mike, is that your feeling when you did property claims?
Yeah, we always tried to err on the side of finding coverage for our insured. So yeah, we would definitely go down that path. Yes.
So hurricanes or just really big gusts that come through, it's the feeling, I think, is if it's going to help the insured, then wind equals windstorm. But now if it's going to be detrimental to the insured, okay, now we have that Rhode Island case. And then there was a really recent case from Texas. This one surprised me greatly, where it was a windstorm deductible. And it did not apply, said the court, to a tornado, which I think for a lot of people is the epitome of a windstorm.
Yes.
That was very surprising. There was a dissent in that case, which I think represents the view that the three of us seem to share, which is more of a common sense. If anything is a windstorm, it seems like it's a tornado. But, the dissent is not the majority of opinion. I think it was probably an appellate court. There must have been a panel of judges, odd number of judges, so that they can't tie. And the majority held on the side of tornado not being a windstorm.
Huh.
Wow. Yeah, well,
so it's a good reminder, I think, that insurance companies can, if they can draft their endorsements to be more clear about what they mean by windstorm, then you can avoid some of these decisions against you.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. And we're talking about ambiguity a lot today, and that's a concept that we've covered in the past. Typically, when you see that ambiguity, it's they rule in favor of, in the insurance context, in favor of the insured. When you have an ambiguity in policy that's drafted by the insurance company, and we're seeing that in that situation, and we'll see it even more.
And speaking of ambiguities, Brennan, when you read those 2 deductible provisions to kick it off, if I heard you right, you said the first time, no other deductible applies. And then you read the second one and you said, no other deductible applies.
Right.
So it seems like we're in direct conflict here.
Yeah, I would probably flag that as a concern. Like we were just talking about, if you have that ambiguity, typically going to see that ruled in favor of the insured. I don't know why I'm mentioning this, but PLRB does offer form reviews. If you head over to plrb.org, you can submit your new endorsements or your policy forms, and PLRB coverage attorneys will look it over and let you know if there's any conflicts like this. It's the kind of thing they look for. But yeah, this is a pretty clear situation where you've got that ambiguity there, and how is the court going to resolve that? Probably going to work in the insured's favor.
Yeah, a lot of times the way this happens is there's just endorsements that get cobbled together into a policy. So one endorsement doesn't know what the other one says, and then you put them together in the same policy, and they don't go together at all. Sometimes when I'm doing these, you'll get the 300, 400-page policies. If Control F works when I'm going through that, I'll just do Control F deductible, and I'll identify every single place in that policy that says anything about a deductible, and I'll just line them up one after another, and I'll read them all. And if I can make sense out of it and harmonize them, we'll go with that. But if there is things that are just irreconcilable like this, I would say don't expect a court to do you any favors.
And I'm feeling no deductible.
None at all?
That's what I'm feeling, because both sides say that no deductible.
Well, maybe you could at least take the smaller of the two.
All right, maybe we'll compromise there. There you go.
There you go. Well, one other thing I wanted to get into here was the business income claim.
Right.
So they had to shut down. This is another one of your chain of events here. So they had the windstorm that caused the power outage, that caused the fridge to shut down. But that's not what directly, they had to shut down not because of the outage, not because they didn't have people, nobody could come in, the lights were off, but they actually had to stay shut down because of all the spoilage. So that's another event that you can sort of tack on here. What issues do we think that can bring in?
I'm wondering, so the power outage makes sense to me. Say it's a long power outage, you got to be out of business. It's interesting to me that say you lose your cheesecake inventory, is that the right word?
Right.
That would put you out of business? I guess it could if you can't fill orders, but it seems like maybe you could make up some of that business in the near future just by filling the orders faster. But this is really more of a hands-on adjuster and accountant thing to figure out how the business works.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I can see both arguments. We had to produce extra because they were all gone now. So that's a business income potential loss. But to your point, Tim, well, if you make them then and eventually sell them, might have taken a few days longer, but you eventually got all of your income you were expecting from said cheesecakes. So maybe there isn't a business income loss. But the other piece of that's extra expense. So if we had to go out and buy all those materials and all the fixins for your cheesecakes, maybe you got some way to get some extra expense thrown in there. Who knows? That's the wonder of insurance.
All right. And while you're collecting that extra expense, something Tim reminded me of in this process, that deductible is not going to apply to the business income. That's going to be a separate deal as you.
Oh.
Yeah, business income, usually the way they do it, they call it a time deductible rather than a monetary deductible, which is just that 72-hour waiting period. So your BI claim can't start until the 72 hours. It's kind of like a deductible, but different.
Makes sense.
Well, I'm getting hungry with all this talk of cheesecake, so let's wrap up. Brennan, what can we take away from this scenario?
All right. Well, I think one of the first takeaways here is that anti-concurrent language that you discussed. When you see a phrase like directly or indirectly, they're still going to be potentially look into that proximate cause analysis, and there's still going to be some ambiguity there. Another takeaway is this windstorm definition issue. You might think that is just plain simple. Hey, it's a windstorm. There's wind. It's a storm. You're done. But there's some case law out there that's actually putting that into question. So watch what state you're in and maybe run some precipitation reports. And then the third point is that if you have got a few deductibles or even a few endorsements, maybe watch how those endorsements all work together. Endorsements are kind of a modular part of a policy where they can kind of, you might not think when they were drafted that these two endorsements might wind up together and they might have some kind of conflict. And that's where plrb.org's form reviews can come in real handy. Those are your takeaways.
I like it. But to wrap up your 3 points into one, read your policies, Brennan, right? Know them. Do what Tim did, his Control F thing, and check all that cool stuff. I didn't even know about no Control F thing. Now look what I've learned there, too. This is fascinating. So thank you, Tim.
Okay, Mike, where can an adjuster go to learn more?
Awesome question. I'm glad you asked me. Of course, plrb.org. We have all the cool weather cat stuff you could ever figure out. You can type in an address, one-stop shopping, find out every type of weather that might have impacted that property. It's awesome. Then, of course, case law. We got Turner Construction versus ACE, which Brennan referenced. That's reviewed in PLRB's archives, as is windstorm deductible, food spoilage, not bodily injury, business income loss, all that tied together, and also a coverage question as well, which you can find at plrb.org. So, Brennan, please, would you kind enough to share those in the show notes, those links?
Yes, and there you'll also find a recap of the key points from this episode and links to our social media. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us, and please give us a call at 630-509-8704 and leave a voicemail to share your adjuster story. We'll see you next time.
The
views and opinions expressed in this resource are those of the individual speaker and not necessarily those of the Property and Liability Resource Bureau, its membership, or any organization with which the presenter is employed or affiliated. The information, ideas, and opinions are presented as information only and not as legal advice or offers of representation. Individual policy language and state laws vary, and listeners should rely on guidance from their companies